Hi, nice to meet you.
I will sit here.
Are you sit here?
É só da vida. Sim, I will take
No, no.
Hello. Yeah, sorry that I'm meeting. Okay. Thank you for the invitation. Okay, thank you.
So my turn, I think.
I have a okay.
Yes. Oh, so I think we'll have to start off.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Marius. I'm the scientific officer of this project, the Marlon project. Everybody can hear me, or shall I use microphone? Over there in the back. Ari, can you hear me?
You can use it.
So, as a scientific officer, I have the pleasure to invite you here in Brussels, in somehow sunny Brussels, for over now. So, we're here for the final dissemination activity of Marlon project. Marlon started in 2012. This is a coordination action. That means that bringing together different research and creating a nice idea of what is existing right now in Europe. And this is the beauty of the project, because the project tries to combine GMO feed and animal health. And this is something that we miss in the commission, and we miss in Europe. We need to know what is the connection between and what is the risk. So I'm not going to talk too much. My role here is only to observe and listen and to learn from you. For me, it's important to be here because I want to know the people behind the scenes, and it's very nice to meet all of you and our presenters. Nothing more to say, I guess. What is more important and what is good to know that in the commission we are very much interested to know what is the added value of each and every project. What we can go after the project and claim that, well, this project was able to show us these results, and from there on to follow up and see what we can do with the policy recommendations or with the new project for the future. I will give the floor to Liz, write your name, for the introduction of the project. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you very much. So this is introduction to the Marlon project. So thank you very much, dear audience, for attending this evening, even on such short notice. We realized that many of you had to accept the invitation. Morning, Martin. Just a few weeks in advance. So this will be a short overview of the project. Of course, more details about certain items in the project, like the epidemiological tool, the field study as such will be provided in several follow-up presentations and also during the workshop for technical experts as well as one for policymakers tomorrow. Okay. So my name is indeed Gijs Kleter from the Netherlands, and I am the coordinator of this project, about which I'd like to share with you a few details. So, in brief, we will discuss the conclusions of this project, provide some background, tell you about the activities, and tell you about certain outcomes that we already have on top of what you're going to hear more about later today. So to start off with some main conclusions of the past 3 years of work done for Marlon, we can say that based on a review of data already out there on genetically modified feeds, because that was actually intended to be the prime target of this project, the potential health impact of genetically modified feeds. Literature indicated in general no health impact of GM feeds tested in scientific studies published in literature. There are a number of monitoring systems in place that can be used for monitoring of health impacts of, for instance, feed on livestock. But there are no systems specifically dedicated, or at least seldom dedicated to this purpose of monitoring for feed-related impacts. And what is also an important outcome is actually that we initially had the idea that, of course, perhaps we could link prior exposure of an animal to GM feeds, or maybe cohorts of animals to GM feeds to specific health outcomes, is that actually there was no technical possibility to reliably measure prior exposure of animals to GM feeds, neither technically, as a kind of biomarker within the animal, or via data on what kind of GMOs are present in what kind of feeds being traded somewhere in Europe. So we'll come back to that later in more detail. But that was, of course, one major consideration also for the establishment of the epidemiological tool by our colleagues from RBC. Because they had to rely on, for instance, other data, like differences in trends, certain trends being observed, but not being able to particularly relate this to GM consumption data. And there's also a part of the project that focused on specific case studies. We had to think of certain cases in which actually GM feed could have a health impact on livestock. This was rather, say, difficult because, as I already explained to you, literature actually indicated that there was no general health impact of GM feed. And the purpose of the project was actually to develop a system or a methodology for monitoring in a case-specific way. That means that whenever the pre-market risk assessment of a GM feed finds that there might be a risk, specific risk related to feed, then there should be a methodology enabling the monitoring of the true health impacts, the true risk in animal populations. So we don't know beforehand, what risks perhaps in future may have to be monitored for. I think the people explaining legislation will come back to this later in follow-up presentations, particularly one on GMOs. But so we had to pick a few hypothetical case studies where we say, well, this might be an effect. And one of them was mycotoxin levels. This is because in some insect-resistant maize, you may have less insect damage and therefore less opportunity for molds to grow on the maize and therefore less opportunity for mycotoxins. So that's really an indirect effect of a BT or genetically modified trait. But it's well known that mycotoxins can have an impact on animal health, of course, for instance, the growth and performance. So there might be an opportunity there, to find, to use bioindicators for that purpose. And obviously also nutritionally improved feeds So a number of genetically modified feeds are in the pipeline that aim to improve nutrition, and this of course is aimed at having an impact on animal health, or at least you know the nutrition of the animal, and you know, examples that we could think of were, for instance, phytase to increase phosphorus availability, and also GM feeds enhanced with amino acids. Okay. So when it comes to the organization of production chains, my colleagues found that, you know, there's a lot already in place in Europe. Things are being regulated very well. Systems in place for traceability, for instance. When it comes to individual animals or groups of animals, there are inspections and controls, you know, like for animal health. And we also have other activities, you know, like, you know, veterinarians visiting farms and such. Slaughterhouse inspections, you know, inspecting carcasses. So there are a lot of opportunities, availabilities of data along the production chain from crop to final product. Yet it's not possible to know the exposure to specific GM feeds. So that was something that was already also concluded there when checking for the possibility to gauge exposure to GM feeds, because there might be some very generic data there on, you know, what's the percentage of GM in our feed. Actually, most of the feed in Europe will contain GMOs. And GMOs actually are genetically modified organisms derived from imported commodities. There's not that much GM crops being grown in Europe, inside Europe, but there's a lot of commodities being imported from places like Brazil, North America, Argentina, and such that contain a lot of GMOs. Our colleagues also developed an epidemiological tool, and this is aimed at supporting the design of monitoring programs, by which we mean that, you know, whenever there's going to be a requirement from a regulatory point of view to have a monitoring system in place for, say, a particular GMO, so that might be part of the marketing approval decision by the European Commission. They have the possibility to actually require monitoring. Then, if the monitoring is to be to exploit existing controls and inspections and monitoring programs, then the tool may actually help to estimate the likelihood that through these systems, if you have a hypothetical, you know, risk and effect on health, you know, that you actually have syndrome, as we call it, because it's based on so-called syndrome surveillance. So you have certain syndromes like mortality and weight gain and such, and abortions and all these things. You can actually estimate the likelihood that through these systems and through the production system, the species, you know, the assumed increase in prevalence of your syndrome, you will actually pick up that effect through existing systems. So how useful is it to set up a monitoring system for this particular effect, for instance? So it will assist, and it is a very generically applicable tool. As I explained before, we don't know yet beforehand now what risks monitoring will be asked for. So the model that we developed in the project had to be very universally applicable to it. And we also, my colleagues, you know, particularly ones from Bulgaria, AgroBio Institute, established a database where they actually collected, you know, data from existing scientific literature on, you know, what kind of effects have already been measured in feeding studies on livestock animals. And I think there will be a presentation, I guess, by our colleague, Kalian, tomorrow on this database. And it will also, you know, help you understand that in this database, we actually have really split up all these separate effects being measured. So it's possible to look up, what data are there on a particular effect. And that's going to be very useful, I think, when setting up such a monitoring system to know which studies have already reported on a certain effect. Oh, sorry. This is, I'm not sure how much time we have, but this is to indicate that we already had some exposure in press, so I'm very grateful to the French Parliament. They used to have some rounds of discussion after a study published by Professor Sherlini and his colleagues. It was a laboratory rat study which showed an enhanced incidence of memory tumors, and there was a lot of discussion within the French Parliament, so experts were invited. And this gentleman, he's Professor Legay, he was the head of a committee of risk assessors. He explained actually that there was this GRACE project and the Marlon project. We're going to have another presentation of the GRACE project this afternoon, but I think he very nicely explained the purpose of the Marlon project. So, if it doesn't work, we just continue, but
Excuse me.
well, maybe I can explain what he just said, and then we continue.
Yes, I forgot to put the volume.
C'est tellement difficile que l'EFSA, actuellement, dans le 7e PC.
Just let's move on.
Okay, sorry.
So he just explains that it's very difficult to test the safety of a whole food or a whole feed in animals, and he says, well, the European Commission has started several projects on this topic, including Marlon, but also GRACE, of course, GRACE with us, to carry out this work. So that was at the very start. And I was, of course, very proud of my project and my team members that they had brought this to the attention of this gentleman. And, it also shows that there is some political interest also in this kind of work because of the discussion of bringing science actually to the French Parliament and even the European Parliament, I guess. Okay, so the Marlon project, in short, it's a 3-year project. I think Marius Lectarius has already explained some of it. It's a coordinating and supportive action project. So no real research has been undertaken in the project. We have not really gone out into the field and started monitoring, although some of our colleagues have done, surveys. They have talked to professionals and such. So it's really edges close on real field work, but we're supposed to actually only do coordinating supportive work. The abbreviation stands for monitoring of animals for feed-related risks in the long term. Okay. Then we have the expected results. As already explained, we have a tool, epidemiological tool, database, recommendations, training, guidelines. That's also something we did in the project. Of course, this is supposed to contribute to food safety in general, food and feed safety in general. Also to have a harmonized approach to post-market monitoring. So particularly for all these applicants that might have to perform monitoring in the future, it's good that the Commission can actually provide them, so the policymakers from the European Commission can provide them with the tools to carry out this monitoring, because it's easy to, of course, impose requirements, but it's more difficult, of course, to help them carry out the work. I must say that, we developed this with the purpose of monitoring for GM feed-related impacts, but we envisage that this has a much wider applicability also for other types of feed. And of course, to promote greater insight between the linkage, into the linkage between health and feed-related impacts. Okay. I'm not sure whether we should discuss this in detail, but I think the main activities of the project, it's all split up in what we call work packages, but I guess that's, something more administrative, but also very important. There are like, sub-projects within the project. So like the real practical situation and the feasibility. Okay, these were the partners taking part in the project. So you see here the logos. I guess the font is relatively small, but you can see we had partners from Netherlands, Bulgaria, France, Spain, Portugal, Italy. So a nice mix, I'd say. Of course, each institution being specialized in a particular field of interest. We have a website which you can visit. I guess you get some further details from Joe, for instance. We have, finished some preparatory work packages. I won't go into detail here about, say, the work accomplished. I can tell you we have this database. It has 3 components. You will hear more about it from my colleague Kalia. It's one on, feed consumption, health-related impacts from scientific studies. Also on the possibility to detect DNA in feeds and on existing monitoring initiatives. Okay. We have a tool. Once again, I have to save time here, but I'd like to tell you this is really to estimate the likelihood of detecting a change in the occurrence of certain syndromes within the population. So, if you really want to go out and monitor for a change in the syndrome, how likely is it that you will really pick up an effect if it doesn't occur? It's really okay. Okay. Feasibility study. I guess Marta will explain more about this in an hour or so, about the field study she did in Catalonia. The Catalonian dairy chain is well organized, and they choose reproduction data. So, of course, you'll have the calving of dairy cows. It's an interesting example. And, of course, also they use the technique of expert elicitation to get data on the background occurrence of this syndrome, with the help of partners from different countries. So thank you very much. I hope I haven't gone too much over my time limit. But,
Thank you. You did a very good job coordinating the project. We do have time for perhaps one question. This will be here for the rest of the day and tomorrow. You can find him easily. Anybody has any questions? Nobody?
okay, but we still have some opportunity to discuss things afterwards.
So, Marta from TG Sante, the unit on animal nutrition. Yes, very good. We presented vegan base, I guess.
Yes, the legal basis.
Okay, would like to use these?
I don't know.
Yeah, whatever you like.
Well, a microphone is fine. You can have
This is.
Can you adjust the screen? Yes, just to the front.
Okay, good morning to everybody. Thank you for the invitation. Generally speaking about legislation is very boring, and don't worry, especially will be confirmed by me, because absolutely. In special way because I suppose the audience is more scientific or technical than legislator. So I suppose yes. So my name is Marta Pongellini. I'm acting as the unit of animal nutrition. Is the unit at the beginning of the chain. That is quite important because we have to manage every feed under nutritional and safety point of view for them. So there is we are not really in charge of monitoring but we are more familiar or managing risk. That is our principal role, because we have the evaluation of the risk made by EFSA, and we manage the result of this evaluation. And maybe the result of your evaluation about this project can be useful for us, because we can use the result and we measure the result. That is in a simple way that we do every day with EFSA or with all the information that we receive from management. Now, the objective of this morning is to give you just an overview of the legislation in place at the European Commission to monitoring or to control risk, hazard, damage, whatever you want. That is, what is monitoring? So we have your, sorry? Ah, okay. So you started to prepare the slide. Monitoring is a word worldwide used, I suppose, and the meaning is exactly probably the same, but the use is completely different. For us, monitoring is a part of our control system made by General Regulation 882, 2004, for official control. You have our official control, you have different type of controls, so surveillance, verification, audit, the most important if you want, because it's a clear part involved, inspection, and also monitoring. And that is the big part, because you can see by definition is exactly a general definition where you need to put in place a system to check something, to verify, to have an overview, to verify something in structural way. That is the principle, and it is also for us, for the control. Means this regulation is managed by the national control authorities. That is important, because the control in Europe are managed at national level, not at European level. The obligation for European level is to, and we have control system in place, but to verify the activities of the control authorities if the control authorities apply the European legislation at member state level. So that is a little bit to explain, because maybe you are not all, you are familiar with the European system. So this is really related to the national authorities, control authorities. In this regulation, you can find also different aspects, especially way related to the labs, to the analytical method, in which way we need to validate analytical method. So a lot of information are related to this regulation to have a kind of uniformity, because that is most important for us, to have a uniformity around 28 member states, because that is one of the problems that we have. Diversity is an advantage, but time to time is also not so easy to manage. So in our legislation, the city legislation, really monitoring is not a very used. So we have this kind of monitoring system just for some kind of product, and in special way for feed additive, where the applicant submitted an application and adoption to EFSA for some kind of product is obliged to provide a system to check, but post-market. So it means after the authorization in concrete way. And it was decided to have just for nutritional additive, for technical additive, for seeding stuff, and and zero, because it was considered by the legislator but the Commission can decide to put this requirement as a condition of use. And up to now, we decide to oblige just post-monitoring plan in place, mandatory, just for procedures to check the resistance to a that is a project because we want to verify if this kind of product still have an effect against. That is the only reason that for which we impose this kind of monitoring with the system that was described. This is an overview of our legislation. We start with the general food law. I suppose every one of you know, because it is the legal base, general legal base for each safety aspect. And after that, we have this the control that I mentioned before, and after we have a specific regulation for the fifth sector. Just a few words related to the obligation foreseen by the General Food Law. General Food Law, the new, if you want, thing is the responsibility of compliance with the law and the verification is in charge of big business operators. So the responsibility is in charge of producer, handling, or whatever you want, marketing, whatever you want. That is the new, if in comparison with the previous legislation, we are speaking about quite old legislation, but the legislation is still the official control is applied as mentioned before, and after you have actually this is something that you can okay. You have specific feed additive legislation. You have sorry, but I need feed market, feed materials, or all kind of legislation. Animal byproduct because it's a part of feed, medicated feed under revision in these days. Regulations, you know, a matter of your project, and you know probably better than me, because I repeat the result of that. After we have very important, you mentioned mycotoxin, and that is we manage by this regulation mycotoxin in feed. So after we have pesticide residues, also important for us. And after we have minor chicken regulation, because we have a lot of vertical, so-called vertical legislation. The three that you have at the beginning are horizontal. So you can find in each one probably some point for to develop monitoring for controls or point to develop to verify the real application of our. Going to the next one about the monitor, you can see General Food Law has introduced this continuous monitoring for the network of the labs. So in principle, the General Food Law introduced the network of the labs, and we discovered to have a continuous monitoring. But the objective is that. So we need to have to know the status of our feed. In any case, it's food safety, but because we are speaking about chain, and feed is really at the beginning of the chain. That is the big point. If you start with wrong, so-called wrong feed, it's impossible after to modify the production derived from our feed. If you have a restaurant, if you have pesticide, if you have toxin, if you have mycotoxin, if you have veterinary medicinal product, if you have whatever you want, it's very difficult to modify to go back to the quality and the safety of your animal products. Because we are speaking about animal health, but for me, animal health is one step to have an animal production for food consumption. That is really different sector. And each one has its specificity, and for us, there are also the member state, because also they are the actors to monitor the safety. The new structure created by General Food Order, the Food Safety Authority, in charge of collecting, in charge of monitoring the risk, in charge of monitoring the procedure. That is a big role in charge of that. And they have developed a lot of tools in this way. And in charge of ELSA, really this is a feedback of the study of the project like you, is important the emerging risk. That is absolutely key point in it. Not just an evaluation of what is already known, but what is possible in the future. That is the challenge for us to prevent this. It's very possible. In this system, a bigger role is for us, rapid alert system for food and feed. It is related in general to import when you have to check, and if the case, you need to communicate the risk to other member states. This is a system managed by the Commission and involving 28 member states. Big and good. The other big point, something I repeated, but this is again the key point for our point of view, control of our point of view, national control authorities, I repeat, to perform controls where we define the characteristic of the control by carried out regularly on each base. They cannot decide, oh, today I want to control something. No, not a plan, an evaluation of the risk. Because behind we have cost, and we have to choose priorities and the based on this risk evaluation made by the member state. You have some criteria, identification of the risk, the history of the business operator, the reliability of the business operator, the information about your compliance, the time of production, you can add whatever you want. There are member states that have a very good system with electronic tools to verify everything. And to modify the frequency after increased control, everything is good. Yes, that is some other characteristic about what is necessary verify. But we have this very horizontal regulation is addressed to the food chain, starting feed, animal health, animal welfare, and food, because that is of our safety of our food. Again, this is this control regulation put in place some obligation to the member state to have a multi-annual control plan. So it means they are thinking about the criteria that I mentioned before. What is necessary to control, following honestly priorities, cost, benefit. Unfortunately, we cannot check everything. We need to choose what is necessary or important on risk levels. And that is the problem because because of limited resources. For our chain, this is the kind of feed that we need to check with feed material, additive, premixture, processing aid, compound feed, and medicated feed that is a special kind of feed. But this is, generally speaking, all kind of feed. And the obligation, there is also the obligation for some obligation for feed business operator. This is generally speaking, there is also the participation to the cost of the company. That is something new, but because the benefit of the control is also a benefit for them. What is also fees in charge of that. Oops, maybe yes. Yes. Another thing I mentioned at the beginning, one of the problems that we had is that to have a network of labs, and that is absolutely important, and in special way and with the same level, with the same possibility and with the same characteristics of the labs. And the availability of the analytical method in line with the international standard, or at least with the characteristic of reproducibility, validation, whatever you want, because one of the principles that we need to follow is homogeneity, uniformity in our system. We cannot have one high-perform control in one way, because we cannot compare with the other not the same level, or it's not compatible. That is absolutely one of the things that we need to achieve in our unit. And so we have the general principle. Not an intermediate, no. And there is all the, you can read if you want, but there is just the point that you need to check when you have an inspection or when you need to take samples or whatever you want. Going ahead in all ways, in a general, in a horizontal way, but more specific for feed, we have feed hygiene. Feed hygiene is an older regulation because it's at least 10 years. And this covers all stages of the production of feed, from primary production, that is absolutely new, because it was for the first time we introduced the primary production under the concept of food chain. Because it is new, because now it's not new, maybe now it's already known. But really at the beginning, when it was established this regulation, the primary producer, farmer, to be clear, was absolutely something not very well defined. And we introduced the primary production, farmer, in the food chain, in the feed chain, sorry. And starting from them, we cover all production of feed, compound feed, feed material, feed additive, medicated feed, feed for particular nutrition purpose. We have different kinds of feed. And also import and export. So the chain is complete. We don't have, or at least at present, we don't know if there are something missing in the feed chain. Pay attention that we cover also, it's not the case, but we cover also feed for pets. So we are in this regulation, we don't speak only about feed for food producing animals, but also for pets. But after we have some derivation, that is clear. But the chain is complete also for pets. We have different rules we identify, I repeat, the feed business operator, primary production, the associated operation in transport, trial, handling at farmer level. What is not primary production is all the rest, not primary production, is something different, and what is important as different rules, this part, with the obligation of control and monitoring system, because ACCP is a system to control and to monitor. That is an obligation that with the exclusion of primary production. The rest is obliged. And after we invent some tools to follow our rules, good practice provided by the state association, by the stakeholder, to help to perform the requirements of this kind of legislation. Primary production, what is important also, concept, because I don't want to repeat everything, what is important in this regulation is the feed business operator, partner, industry, transport, distributors, market, everything should be aware or is aware about the risk linked to his job, work, to his sector. So that is a very important concept. So you cannot say, I didn't check for my production because I was not aware. No, you know, today, this year, the climate conditions are very in favor to develop mycotoxin. You need to think about it, and you need to put in place a system if condition that is clear. But really, this is a very simple example, but we have a lot of example. So you are aware that we have some problem with GMO not authorized and are circulated in Europe. You need to think about it, and you need to take provision of it. That is a concept introduced by Fidelis. I explain in a simple way, so it's more sophisticated, but just to give you the idea. And what is a principle for primary production? They need to measure and to put on the control the risk derived from the current source, so what is a link, strictly linked to the production. We are speaking about farmer. And the other linked to some other hazard linked to animal health, plant health, and in principle, this program for zoonose agents or whatever you want. So there are a kind of level of risk from the first and from the second one. After, there is an obligation to keep record of it. If they check, if they control, they need to keep record in general. That is why controversy is very difficult because we are speaking about carbon. That is something difficult. But at national level, there are modulation about this kind of requirements. So all member states have already put in place a system to help farmers to, in any case, to favorize this. Again, we are speaking about what is not primary production, is the other part of the production system, and what is important in that system is the obligation to put in place ACCP. And we have some rules about ACCP. That is really a system to monitor by CCP1, CCP2, certification of the risk, but I suppose everyone is familiar with the ACCP system, so I don't want to repeat, but just because by this annex we oblige all other different from primary production and from the use of very simple raw material without damaging, to have this control system in place with samples, with analytical method, with a written system, with a record keeping. Very, I assure you, very modern. But it's the only system, or the only way to put under control this kind of production. Because for the control authorities, no other possibility to verify what is done. So, we are the stakeholder, or in general, the representative of the stakeholder complaining with us because we are really bureaucratic. But we don't have any other possibility. We need to have documentation to verify what is done. So that we try to find out, or member states try to find out different solutions for small producer, they have some derivation. So also in our regulation, there are some derivation for domestic or faith, but also for very small quantities production, because we want to alleviate this administrative burden. But in any case, we need to what is important is for ACCP is the big business operator responsible for it. So he can decide which are the hazard, which are the risk, control, to eliminate it, to have a limit for it. The control authorities are out of this kind of system. They can check and they can verify if really the big business operator has all instruments to put their product in the company. An exception to this system is dioxin monitoring, and that is something different because due to the sensitivity of the problems, the risk linked to the dioxin, by an amendment of this regulation, we, as member state, decide to put in place a more structured system to verify the presence of dioxin in specific feed material in general, oil or packaging. But just to have a distinction on yes, this is something that I want to repeat, but is the system of ACCP. Yes, this is what I said at the beginning. To help to perform is a very big part of the key part of our legislation for the production is that. So we invite stakeholder association and or association to develop at local level or community level guidance to have a uniformity again and to perform this kind of system. Just to give you an example, because that is the system. For example, we are speaking about general food law, food controls, and feed hygiene. That is the base horizontal. Here, we consider that is most important piece of vertical legislation because we have authorization of fidelity, but is vertical. We have catalog where we have specific characteristic of each material market in Europe. But it is, you can consider vertical and horizontal in the meantime. This is something different from, for example, the from USA or Canadian system, where they have, in practical way, very simple. Also for cereal, very simple material for us to consider raw material without any problem. They need to receive a kind of, it's not true, but kind of authorization, really for wheat, for mice, for whatever. We follow a completely different approach. We have a catalog where we put all kinds of feed, raw material, feed material that we have, with some specific characteristics that we consider important for each one, but not water. But we have this kind of horizontal legislation a vertical legislation because it is related to the undesirable substances, mycotoxin, dioxin, PCB, water, botanical impurities, or whatever you want. And we have a list of this kind of undesirable substances with the limits in which kind of feed we want to have, or we consider is artistic. Really, this is a list of the dangers that we can have following the specific feed. So for fidelity, we have just aflatoxin, we have possible for some kind of feed, we have dioxin, again, PCB, we have heavy metals, we have a lot of, I don't know, probably we have 200 substances in this we have also some action to when we consider that we have really difficult to put under control a product, so we need to very monitor to achieve a very low maximum achievable level, because that is also one of the problems we have. But also to have an overview, because sometimes it's not possible to put under sometimes. And the provision to be taken when you have go over the after the stuff. Also, this is linked to Russia, because when you find out something is not correct following the directive, there are notifications, there are systems take place, and the system starts. So, not all of this directive, sorry, is mandatory. After we have, for different reasons, we have this recommendation for some other products, and you can find mycotoxin again, some other products, that this is just a recommendation. Because we are not sure of the, maybe not just of the risk, but we are not sure about what is the, we can say, natural level, or what is the big ground. So we need to have more information to establish the risk. And this for my last, but the system is quite complex. I repeat, give you an overview. I don't know if it's clear or not, but it's more or less the system.
Thank you, but it's very important legislation. It might be boring, but it's there to be followed. And as a Greek who knows best how to follow this. Do you have any questions?
In your talk, you described that in the frame of the general food law, there is a network established, and also institutions, laboratories are established, and the responsibility for this overview, for these controls, go with the member states and with the competent authorities. So then, in the regulation of on feed hygiene, you said that some responsibilities are going to the operator. So I'm interested in the interplay, because in the frame of the GMO regulation, for the mandatory monitoring, only the event holder, the applicant, is responsible. So how is the interplay organized between the different responsibilities in the general food law, in the and also in the meat hygiene regulation?
I I can give you just a general answer because I'm not responsible for GMO. But in any case, we have the same system in fidelity because we have an order of authorization for an applicant, procedure start, where they are obliged and they are responsible for the product. One team is responsible for the product, for the conformity of the product to what is authorized. The second aspect is the use of the product. Don't forget, when you have a GMO, you need to use. And the control authorities, they have two things. One is to verify the GMO is complying with GMO authorized or with fidelity authorized in my situation. The second aspect is the use. That is not linked to the characteristics. That is very important. And the second aspect is the role of the business operators is that is important. So the use or the business use of the fidelity GMO for you is not in charge of applicant responsible for the organization, but is responsible for his business operator, one of his business operators. And in that case, this is the link for this is the role of the lab to verify if the use is correct. With, for example, in my case, with maximum limit verify for the product. Because for labs, they only see this one. So we have two different responses.
Very good. No other question? The last one, this one,
Hello, my name is Claudia Paoletti, I'm from EFSA. Actually, I would have two questions for you. I'm trying to think. You said that for the risk evaluation, member states have electronic tools in place with which they can monitor pretty much everything you said. And I was curious to understand a little bit more of what you meant with that. And that was my first question. And my second question is that in some of your slides, you mentioned the issue of sampling, which I think is key because it is the first step. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit further on how.
Don't worry.
I'm sorry. How this is performed, if there are specific guidelines that are followed by everybody, by all the authorities, like how is handled?
Okay. I repeat that the control system is not my daily job, so I can answer you just partial. But if you want more information, I can provide you more information asking the right people. But in any case, there are some member states, they have already developed electronic system, there is a tools where they put in place a system with the list of the business operators, the all controls, the production, and the result of the controls, and for which they can identify what is more problematic in relation to the reliability of the key business operator itself, and is clear linked to the production because it's clear when we speak about production of consider stuff is very sensitive from my point of view because when you provide and you evaluate as EFSA the application, you need to give me an opinion, cover all safety aspects. It is more complete issue because from target, from safety for the target species, safety for the consumer, safe user, and environment. That is absolutely important. So there is a kind of level. And some member states develop this kind, but the idea on risk basis, the idea is to optimize the cost. So because we need really to achieve a compromise between what we would like to check and what is really good. The second question about the sample. The sample, we have for feed, there is a specific regulation 152, 2009, okay? And we have a list of this kind of analytical method and the method of sampling. Very complicated for feed because we have elementary sample from final samples, representative sample, liquid, solid, specific provision for mycotoxin or for other contaminants were not well distributed around the quantity of your feed, plus the sample and the analytical method and the characteristic analytical method are developed also in 882 control, it's very complicated. You need to combine two because you have, for example, for analytical method, you need to combine with 882 to have the repeatability, verification of your method. And the sample is to develop the method to have sample is described. But the frequency, quantity, is performed by 882 with national plan, control plan. Complicated. I don't know.
Very good. So let us invite Dr. Luis
Okay.
for the next presentation. Of course, we have a break. If you have more questions, feel free to ask Martha. Please. It's up to you. Either you standing or you. Okay. Yeah.
Hello, good morning everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm Dr. Spence. I'm a veterinary epidemiologist working at the and our contribution to the Marlon project has been to evaluate the surveillance systems to establish if monitoring on an animal health level were to occur, whether or not we could detect any changes which may be So the aim of the work package was to develop methodology to assess the ability of monitoring strategies to identify potential adverse outcomes for the objective with the model is that it can be freely available to relevant actors to allow for each policy recommendations to be made based on country basis and be implemented as evaluation. As part of the project, there were a number of work packages which had a look at sorry, can you not go? Is that a bit better? Yeah? Okay. Which were background research for our model, and that included the literature review and the benchmark analysis such as performed to evaluate the traceability of GMP. Now, I'm sure you're more familiar with me as the pre-market monitoring and the pre-market testing, which occurs automatically alongside the feed. Obviously, the United States clinical trials look at a large number of outcomes, and all of these are assessed in depth in rodent models before the
So the question really is, given obviously this 3 month monitoring and this testing, what is the rationale for monitoring animal health? Okay. So our colleagues did a very comprehensive review of animal movements, testing of both the labelling and testing of the in the EU and the difficulties that we see which are associated with that, which is one of the reasons why our model specifically focuses on the surveillance of animal health effects rather than necessarily focusing on the exposure of the the database very nicely shows that with all of the longer term farm animal related studies, there is no consistent evidence for any adverse health effects. So at this point in time, the evidence suggests that there can so far be nothing to be able to be demonstrated. Okay, so some of the difficulties which were established to begin with is that the traceability of beef is very flexible. It varies considerably from farm to farm, from week to week, and from year to year, which means that any capturing of exposure to testing feed in a model which is aimed at population levels is not applicable. We consider looking at benchmarking data, to consider looking at organic farms to this comparison. All of these weren't considered to be as accurate as would be required in order to give any beneficial information on the simulation. It may be possible to do smaller scale studies to actively measure, but the labelling is still not sufficient at this point in time to be able to quantify that. Okay. So the brief that we were given was fairly broad. We were asked to evaluate both changes in production variables, adverse effects on current disease states, and unknown outcomes, even adverse effects. So the model is aimed at, like I said, evaluating at a population level the possibility that if an adverse event occurred, what would be the sensitivity of detection in relation to those objectives. So this required us to produce a very broad and very flexible tool which can be used and can be taken away. And this tool can be applied to any strain of GMP that is required, and I think it's particularly useful in the consideration of new strains. The model can assess the ability to detect and inform the best strategy to detect and identify the problems that could be detected. But what it does not do is show that there is a link between cholesterol protein and syndrome that is detected. That is beyond the capability of the model. All we're aiming to do is to evaluate if there was a change, if it would be detected. Obviously, this is really important information to know, because if we're going to implement monitoring, we need to know if it's going to be something that's going to be picked up. So what's the purpose of surveillance? We have a number of generally accepted outcomes when you are designing monitoring and animal health. So a nice way of considering those is demonstrated disease. This requires a very specific outcome. It requires you to be able to have a sensitive test for one specific disease, and then to evaluate at a population level whether or not that disease is present in the country. At this point in time, we aren't sure what outcomes may be attributable to GMP, if indeed there are any, which means that this is not appropriate for us to be able to use, because we don't have a sensitive test to show whether or not there is anything that is being outcome. Okay. So other things which could be more useful or more plausible are early detection of disease or case finding. Based on prevalence evaluation, again, if you don't know what your outcomes are, is quite difficult. It's not really very feasible. So early detection of disease is really more difficult to unknown adverse effects, whereas sort of a more case-finding approach might be more appropriate to be used with respect to any changes, any small changes in production, possibly allergenicity, and the kind of outcomes which would include sort of more mild or more small changes which may be changes. Okay. So as far as I'm aware, there is some current adverse event reporting which occurs both within the EU and in other countries, which is looking at unknown adverse events. So this is a case detection method of surveillance, and it is relying on the farmer-related vet to report their unknown adverse events to a regulatory body. It requires that the farmer realises that there's a problem, and the farmer feels that that problem may be attributable to genetically modified foods. So the purpose of farmer law is to establish at what level the farmer might consider that to be a problem, and then to go to a regulatory body. If the farmer doesn't consider there to be a problem, or doesn't consider there to be a change or an adverse event, then it means that they're not going to protect it, they're not going to inform their vet, and therefore that is not going to speed up the chain to report it. And obviously, we would want the majority, a sensitive detection done to as possible, so any potential adverse effects to be reported rather than underreported. Okay, so in order to try and evaluate this, because the brief is so broad, to try and look for all unforeseen and plausible effects, we have used the tools from syndromic surveillance, which are well documented and well used within veterinary technology, and this relies on categorizing any potential conditions into disease syndromes. It includes clinical findings, endemic diseases, and production parameters, which we followed a standard process of categorization to try and ensure consistency with other uses of syndromic surveillance. We've focused primarily on high production animals, animals which are more likely to possess high concentrations of genetically modified feed. So even dairy and poultry are the main ones. We do have a veterinary model of fish that I didn't data for that. So these are the syndromes which we primarily focused on. Okay, so in order to evaluate, we've considered various different data sources. And so the first one is passive on farm. So this is the farmer, the local land, our data, horizontal findings, and specific government level interventions. This is for animal health monitoring. It's not specifically related to national health. It's considering data which may already be done, which may already be available, and just using it as a ability to use in relation to feed-related risks. So this is a structure of the surveillance part of the model. It relies on scenario tree methods, which is essentially mathematical probabilistic modeling. So each phase will have a probability of detection, and we prioritize that using exposed data. The different stages of detection will contribute to the overall detection for one particular farm, and we can then magnify that, model that, or simulate that rather, at a national, potentially international level. This particular scenario tree is outlining the unknown or emerging or novel adverse event tree. We have got a variation on the model for both known and unknown, as we've discussed. And this one obviously looks for unknown or novel emerging conditions. So here's just a screenshot of this phase of the model, and as you can see, numbers. And at the end, it comes out with an open sensitivity for that unit. Each of the signs are combined in a parallel fashion, which essentially means that the sensitivity of the model is designed to be at its most sensitive. So what we're looking for is the probability of any one of those syndromes being detected. So each or any one of those syndromes being detected. Okay, so far we have used S1 data to parameterize our model, but as this model is freely available and it's a tool which can be used for anyone or to use, it can be parameterized with data which is probably available from literature or specifically to surveillance data, or if it was suitable to do that, actual active prospective survey data could be if that was the something having that. So the purpose of evaluating detection of baseline syndromes is so that we can establish a known or baseline level of detection. This obviously is very difficult because genetically modified feed is already in regulation. The proportion of farms which actually consume genetically modified feed is very, very high, even if the feed that is actually within the animal feed is of a low proportion, the chances are that they are consuming genetically modified feed at a high probability. So the scenario I'm going to show looks for the introduction of a new strain and the detection of a new strain. So the model outputs come here, and this gives you the different levels of surveillance and the probability of detection for all those different levels at baseline. And here we have simulated population, which looks at the number of farms which would be detected, if there was an introduction of genetically modified feed, and if that feed was waste. This will then allow us to simulate the detection at each of those different stages to see which would be the most appropriate. Okay, so the tool itself allows for the different outputs to be compared to show the sensitivity detection at each different stage. Okay, so the probabilistic model was performed in a software program to identify different rates of detection, and mathematical simulations were run to establish it in the event of GMD causing an increase in prevalence of a certain event syndrome, with the increase being detectable by simulation. And I've already said, it was for known adult and known conditions. I wanted to know example this was to perform this. Okay, so here is an example of output data from our model. It's parameterized using survey data for spoken elicitation from the UK. So as you can see, this gives you a probability of detection for a change or magnitude of risk of 5%. 5% was just chosen as a value to use to give you an idea as to what the probability of detection is. It would obviously be down on any level of risk. I know that there are many people in this room that would like to have some confidence that gene food causes no change towards the less than 1% or half percent. But for the purposes of just showing you, we've taken a value of change no greater than 5% to be detected. And we're 95% confident that we've got a detection. So each syndrome includes probability. So for reproductive conditions, based on the data, we would have 40% probability of detection. That means that if genetically modified feed were to cause greater than 5% change in any reproductive syndrome, we would only be 40% certain that we could identify based on the kind of systems. So that obviously suggests that method, 60% of not being able to detect it versus 40%. So that's worse than 50%, which is worse than fine. So that's at one specific time point. So the probability would always increase as it goes over a longer period of time. Interestingly, there are some conditions where we would be very, very unlikely to detect anything. So treatment failure is one of those where the probability of detection is nearly zero. So treatment failure is essentially antimicrobial resistance. That's what the model is designed to try and identify. And I think the take-home message from this is that standard surveillance is not sufficient to identify antimicrobial resistance that we need to do very specific monitoring in place in order to try and evaluate that if that were a concern which wanted to be addressed. I know we discussed earlier in the project about whether or not the antimicrobial resistance was a relevant concern as some the conclusion now is that the marketing are not transferable to microbes. But nevertheless, that was something that was an interesting finding. I think from various states. Okay, we've got a so the sensitivity of detecting change will vary with each syndrome. Each syndrome is it has a different level of probability of detection, and I think one of the take-home messages from this is that we need to decide what we want to monitor for, because in order to have an evaluation of the surveillance system for specific adverse events, then it's much easier to do that if we're currently aware of what the risks are. Obviously, the information that we have at the moment that appears to be any evidence of adverse events like programs, monitoring for everything is going to be much more difficult and much more costly. I thought a very interesting outcome of the simulation that we ran with the data was that there doesn't appear to be a relationship between the prevalence of the syndrome. So that would mean the level of which it were to occurs in the current population, and the detection rates and the sensitivity of detection. So you're just as likely to be able to detect something which is very, very common, something which is less common according to the simulation. However, there did appear to be some relationship between the severity of the condition, and so more severe outcomes were more likely to be reported, more likely to be detected than more mild condition. So another interesting finding is that at one time point, based on the data which we parameterized, none of the syndromes favors a probability of detection of greater than 80%, which means that 2 out of 10 times you're not going to be able to detect it. So this graph shows a magnitude of change in prevalence, or degree to which the genetic modified feed causes a change, causes a risk, essentially, on the person. And on the side is the probability of detecting a population level. So I've chosen in the technical system just because the data was quite nice to show you. And it shows you that at 1%, which is obviously a threshold which a lot of people like to be very certain of, we've got a less than 50% chance of being able to detect change. As the risk increases, so as the degree to which the genetic modified causes or may cause a change in the baseline clinical signs and disease conditions, then the probability of detection increases accordingly. So when you have 20% risk, you have greater than 80% chance of detection. So the reason I choose that system is just because it represents one of the higher probability of detection syndromes, which we saw, but even still at a very low risk, the probability of detection is still there, it's still 40%, which personally I don't think is sufficient to start monitoring at that level. I would want a higher level of probability of detection before we want to use that as part of the monitoring system. So this is neurological conditions. It's actually mild neurological conditions, as we start to find them with mild conditions. But this is just an example of a very low probability of detection condition. And again, on the acceptance, this is the risk or the change in prevalence which may be linked to modified food, and around the 5% levels, you can see that the modern disease protection is about 2 to 3%. As it increases, and you have a 20% change then, yeah, we have an increase of approximately 3%. So these are very, very low levels of protection, which suggests that, you know, that level of risk is very unlikely to be detected by the kind of surveillance system, and more specific monitoring is needs to be put in place. And it might not be one of the conclusions maybe that it is not appropriate to use that specific monitoring system. Smart very kindly provided me with some data for surveillance from Spain. So we've parameterized the model with that as well, and we can see that the probabilities of detection of certain conditions are quite similar, but there is quite a lot of variation between countries, and this is more than likely to do with the differences in the actual surveillance system rather than necessarily differences in the baseline conditions themselves. Okay, there are a number of collaborative EU-wide surveillance programs. They are specifically looking at zoonotic disease, infectious disease, and high-risk conditions. So at the moment, data sharing isn't as available for small mild conditions or more production level parameters, and it is specifically targeted at high-risk events. So it means that that system it could be extended to incorporate events which were of interest, but is not the most appropriate use because it's looking at very specific infectious diseases rather than the things that we've been evaluating. So targeted reporting may be possible to increase the sensitivity detection at various different points, but again, it still would need to be established as to what would be monitored for. So one of the ways which we discussed in order to improve the sensitivity and specificity is to consider multivariate monitoring, which would mean looking at multiple parameters to form a potential adverse event. For example, if allergenicity were a concern, to look for a number of markers which could be attributed to allergenicity and to monitor for those simultaneously, thereby increasing your sensitivity and protection to the syndrome of interest rather than looking at those individuals. Okay.
Thank you very much, Luis. Perhaps some time for one or two questions before the short break. Anybody is willing to ask? Well, I have to.
Yes, thank you for a nice presentation. You really highlighted that you can support this and it would be interesting to read this before, and it would be interesting to read this before we have discussion. But I can see you can have it would be interesting to see maybe come up later on if you this surveillance system was intended to have a post-marketing on a specific GMO, then you could design a certain study, but if you go in the same thing is if you should have a surveillance system going on all the time to see what is going on, then you really are looking for everything. Then it's really a challenge. And then I also wonder how if you find something for these syndromic diseases and not for specific series, because if there are series, we should be picked up in free marketing, or we should find it. But if you find, for example, changes in these syndromic diseases like in reproductive value or data something else, and these are going on all the time, and they are very multifactorial. And if you find some indication that there might be a change in one of these syndromic syndromes, for example, the changes in reproduction values, then how will you continue? Because then you have to go further on and discuss that.
Absolutely. So the purpose of the model is to detect and to evaluate whether or not, if there were a change noticed over the longer period of time, would that be detectable? It does not say that then there is any relationship between genetically modified feed. Further testing and surveys would need to be carried out in order to establish whether or not that was related to the feed or whether it is not. It is purely about if you were to implement animal health monitoring as part of the post-market monitoring package, would it actually detect anything? So that's the whole purpose of the model that we discussed. So yes, you would need to consider this as well in order to establish whether or not there is a connection.
And I also just a short follow-up question when you look at the question of definition, or it's a question of definition of side effects. But if you have a GMO, and for example, and that increases the efficiency of production, then you may gain side effect because of they are more efficient to grow faster, for example, that maybe not because of the GMO feed, but instead they are more efficient. So is that considered as a GMO effect or as an efficiency of feed?
I mean, for the model doesn't look for GMO effects. It looks for the probability of detecting any adverse effects, and it is then up to further research to try and establish whether or not that is related to the genetically modified food. So it purely looks at whether or not there is a change.
Sorry, I think we have this example of microtoxins, so that's, yeah,
No,
that's
I
really a
understand the
corollary
question.
side effect. Well, thank you, Marlon. Well, we did have this example of microtoxins, which is really a kind of side effect of the GMO. So that was actually reported in, I guess, what they call general surveillance of GMOs. There were some Czech farmers, in fact, it's BT maize, as it is called, it's rather on a small scale, and they reported improved performance of livestock being fed the GMAs. So the earlier hypothesis was very likely this is due to low microtoxicity. I think that's what Martin's question refers to. Yeah, we had discussions within our group when we discussed the health indicators and such. That, of course, it's just a secondary effect of the GMO, so it's not really GMO, the genetic modification itself, of course. But that's also a consideration, and we're not aware of the fact that this kind of secondary effect is being monitored for. I remember that when this GMAs was to be introduced in France, there was this issue, particularly because France became the chair of the European Union, and there was this request for data on the mycotoxin content and the possible consequences for livestock and such. But it never got that far. It was actually prohibited. It wasn't market anymore in France. So from that perspective, but yes, I think it's also the formulation of the question. So what kind of effects are we going to look for? Whether or not to take that on board. But the problem is we can't foresee what's going to be the question. What kind of effects are we going to have to look for?
Let me suggest a very short break for coffee. We can come back at 12 o'clock in 10 or 15 minutes to continue half an hour behind, but I guess we can manage.
Are we going to have the presentation?
Presentation is right here.
Eh?
The presentation is here.
Are only in the web. Are already in the web page.
If we are going to share.
Yes.
Well, if you agree, we will
We
share.
would like to have the presentation.
Share.
Yes.
All the presentations.
All the
Of
presentations.
course, yes, we are going to put on the website.
Okay.
The page on the website just with all the
Okay.
presentations. Yes.
Thank you.
And we can share.
Because we are interested in some
Of course,
presentation.
and we can use your smart Bomalini's as well. Can we share?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
no
Okay.
problem.
Yes.
We just to have access to the other
Yes,
presentation.
yes, we will share. Yes.
Well, sometimes bureaucracy is needed as well.
No, no, but I know. I need to leave because today is my last day before holiday.
So enjoy your holidays. Hopefully you're going to be nice.